Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Series 7 Part B story, The Crimson Horror, written by Mark Gatiss and is directed by Saul Metzstein. Now, this story sees the return of the Paternoster Gang, as the story is set in Yorkshire, 1893, and it's essentially a story that's mainly about them, to the point where you could get the feeling that this story might have actually been leading up to a spin-off, which never happened. Well, it kind of did happen because we did get the big finish Paternoster Gang. So if you're interested in these characters in this century, then I highly recommend those, even though I haven't actually listened to them yet. So there's that to consider. The whole mystery between Clara is then discovered by them, or at least this is the first time they get to be introduced to the modern incarnation of Clara Oswald, after they previously met a previous incarnation, the Victorian Clara from The Snowmen. So that's some real interesting stuff right there. Now, Mark Gatiss will be the only writer in the series to have who would have written for the Paternoster Gang outside of Stephen Moffat himself. This is the first and only time that that the Paternoster Gang would not be written by Stephen Moffat. And as well, Mark Gatiss brings a lot of his tropes, a lot of his quirks into this story, where it's usually set in the past, usually has influences from real life history. However, he brings a supernatural element to it, and makes it almost like a horror story, a horror film. Many elements of this story do feel like a horror movie, especially what happens with the Doctor, which we will get into in due time. But this also is a important story because it features the acting talents of Dame Diana Riggs. Now, for those of you who don't know, she was a massive star in the 1960s, starring in the 60s British television series The Avengers, not to be confused with Marvel's Avengers, and she also appeared in one of the James Bond films. I want to say she starred in Her Majesty's Secret Service. And after a while then, she kind of went out of obscurity, but she was still a big star. And her claim to fame then came back in her elderly age, where not only did she appear in Doctor Who as Gilliflower, but she also appeared in Game of Thrones, playing the mother to one of the characters, and she had this kind of dry wit about her. And so she became really big again due to Game of Thrones. So I can't remember what came first, if she was in Game of Thrones first or if she was in Doctor Who first, but just to say that having her on Doctor Who at this point in her life was an incredible grab by the BBC Productions and Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss and Saul Metzstein. Just what a great performance by Diana Riggs. Just amazing. But what about the story itself? Well, let's talk about the general consensus, because that's what I usually do at the start of these videos. Generally, the story isn't considered that particularly great. Sure, it has some fans, but the majority of people find it either a dull, boring experience or a story that they can easily skip on rewatches. It has nothing really going for it, just really something that a lot of people just kind of forget when they watch it, and it leads then into the next story, which features the big Cybermen written by Mark Gatiss, and then after that then we have the finale of Series 7. So this story has kind of an awkward place because it takes place just before all the big important stories, but a lot of people were looking forward to. So yeah, on that out of the way, let's get into this story. Now, this story, I actually really like the pre-credit sequence, which basically sets up this mystery, sets up all of the plot points that we need to learn. Essentially, we see this couple, and they seem to be investigating Mr. Sweet's Sweetville, this place which is supposed to be like locked out from rest of civilization, this small little like village where only like the bright and the best people would go, and they seem to have some sort of factory, but these investigators, they're not too sure, and so one of them goes into this room where then suddenly the female of the crew get introduced to Miss Gilliflower and her henchman, and she's just like, I'm sorry for your husband, your departed husband. I'm sorry, that can't be right, my husband is alive and well. And then all of a sudden you hear screams in the background, and then later on then somebody found a dead body in the ditch. It was the body of the man. And something has happened to his skin whilst he died. His skin has now turned completely red. His brother, who is a detective, he has come to Yorkshire from London. He's like a policeman or something, to investigate his brother's death. And on looking onto the corpse, he has discovered something very bizarre, something very odd in his brother's eye. And so he goes to London and tracks down Vastra, Jenny and Strax, the Patronotragan, and he essentially tells them that there is an image in his eye, a strange image. He references a Roman philosophy that the eye keeps an image of the last thing it sees, but this is literally there's an image that is changed, and Vastra basically explains it's like, that can't happen unless the body's chemical has been altered to the extreme, and essentially we learn that in the eye of this man is the Doctor, seemingly screaming in terror. And so our team go to Yorkshire. Now that is a great way of setting up the stakes, setting up the mystery. It makes this this team feel like basically like the Sherlock. You set up the mystery, you set up the plot, and then the majority of the story is them finding clues, finding mysteries. And this story basically sets it up. Like I said, this story feels like a feels like a pilot episode to a spin-off. For you see, the Doctor and Clara don't actually appear until the 20-25 minute mark, which is a huge risk when you consider that at this time in the series, there was still a lot of people that were up in the air about whether they actually liked the Patronotragan or not. But I like that this story took a bold risk, and that Mark Gatiss actually allowed them to flourish, allowed them to have their own time, their own moments. Seemingly the main character is Jenny in this story, who basically goes undercover, seeing as she's the only human of the team, to be part of this cult. And we essentially learned that that he was investigating the journalist, the brother of the police officer, wherever he was essentially learning about, he was going into this mystery about Sweetville, run by Miss Gilliflower and a mysterious Mr. Sweet. We get introduced to Miss Gilliflower again in this church environment where she's with the pilgrims, and she basically explains her philosophy, how society needs to be abandoned because it has just fallen to horrible addictions and stuff like that. And she basically goes into this this demonstration, shall we say, where she basically explains about her late husband was an alcoholic and beated up her daughter so that she is blinded, and she basically get introduced then by Ada, played by Rachel Sterling, and Ada's Ada is a character who doesn't really get a lot of screen time to her. When you actually rewatch the story, you might be surprised at how little she's actually in it. She has her own little plot line, her own little advance in the story, but the story isn't actually about her, which is really strange, because I distinctly remembering that Ada was one of the big standouts of this story. And she is. She's this really sweet, empathetic character. She's really shy, but she has befriended this creature known as the Monster, which she locks up away from her mother in the basement of their factory. And essentially, we learn through Ada that essentially she wants to be considered part of her mother's new world. She wants to. She feels like if she's good enough to her mother, she's kind enough to her mother, despite her mother being treating her like absolute horrible, absolutely just outright abusive at some points. That she's too shy of herself. She's not confident in herself, and so it is to huge relief that she kind of gains this friendship with this monster, who she basically cannot let go. So she basically has imprisoned him in a sense to go up into the basement, where she kind of looks after him and kind of sees herself in her, and hopes that when she reveals the monster to her mother, that the monster, her monster, will also be able to come to Sweetville with her. And so Jenny basically signs up herself to be part of a system which would get her into Sweetville. And basically Vastra and Strax are only really there at this moment as comic relief, and they basically also investigate more of the outside. So Jenny, like I say, really gets the main plot, the main focus. We also get this strange scene, which actually took me a while to understand it. There's a great moment where Jenny, in this line, she basically befriends another woman in the line who thinks that, she would love to be a part of this perfect society, only she's worried that her teeth might let her down. And Jenny can hear these factory sounds, these big factory noises, despite there seemingly nothing really of factory value to be going around here. So Jenny asks this woman to pretend to faint, and she gives her a shilling if she does it, and then the woman's just like, deal, and collapses to the floor. I love that, as Jenny uses that as a distraction to go through the doors. And essentially, Jenny learns that there is no factory. There's only these sound systems that make it look like the factory is in use, when in fact it isn't. Or at least this particular room is just dead out empty, with only a handful of people actually working there, which she can hide from behind the microphones, the sound system, so that she can investigate what's going on. And she basically reports back to Vastra and Strax. I can't remember where it was at this point in the story, but essentially at one point then we get Jenny. She basically overhears something where she's investigating this red room. She looks into the thing. She looks into this window that's just completely faded with red gas, so she can't see through it. But suddenly she hears the banging in the basement of this monster, and she's curious about it. So she goes up and she opens this little shutter that Ada uses to send the food in. But she's quickly surprised by a red hand basically grabbing by her in total panic. And Jenny finds the communication as the monster starts banging at things. This is I'm gonna say it's like a spoiler warning, because this is so shocking. When I first saw it, I remember being absolute. I remember making the noise when I first watched this. As Jenny's basically, she's tempted. It's like, right, I'm going to open this door, but we got to make a promise. We're going to make a deal that you won't hurt me. That we work together on this as we try and find out what Gillyflower's after. You hear me? Boom, boom. 2 knocks for yes. Okay, so she breaks into the door. She slowly opens the door. We see her reaction. She's in total panic. She's in total fear, and she goes, "Doctor?" And then we get a cut of the doctor, who is now completely red, and his mouth is permanently open, and he is just in pure pain as he's clawing away in Jenny's direction. And it's like, that is a horrifying imagery right there. There's also one bit which Saul Metzstein gives this really beautiful close-up of Matt Smith's face, and Jenny kind of like pokes his face, and it sounds like wood that's like empty, so like it has like a shell kind of sound. It's really disturbing stuff. If it wasn't for the fact that Matt Smith has this really quirky, really cartoonish looking face, it might have looked even terrifying. Can you imagine with like David Tennant with this concept? And so basically this is where the Doctor gets in, and Jenny basically frees the Doctor from Ada, who basically goes up to give the Doctor more food. However, when she basically learns that that her monster is free, and that Gillyflower finds out, it's like, right, we have an intruder, we have an escape reject in the world. We'll have to go and search the entire building to try and stop. We'll have to stop. And so Jenny takes the Doctor to this capsule, and the Doctor basically comes out scot-free as this system seems to be reversing the process of what happened to him and Gillyflower. And so, before we get into the flashback scene, there is actually a controversial moment here. This is a scene which actually didn't kick much fuss when the story first aired. However, after years of reevaluating and re-watching this story, a lot of people do have issue with this scene where the Doctor, in his excitement, in his joyful nature, he basically kisses Jenny, who is a known lesbian at this time, in the mouth, to which then she promptly slaps him across the face, and the Doctor's just like, yes, you don't know how good that feels. There's also a bit in this, there's a fight scene, a pretty decent action scene, if really brief, where Jenny puts out the battle armor, shall we say, and the Doctor uses a sonic screwdriver. He points it up, he realises he points it up, and then he points it back down in concentration. Now this issue seems to point to more Stephen Moffat than it does Mark Gatiss, as Stephen Moffat would always have these kind of quirks. The best way of putting it is kind of fetishes into Doctor Who, into his female cast. Although again, like I stated, this story is written by Mark Gatiss, who is a close friend of Stephen Moffat, so how much Stephen Moffat influenced the script, we don't know. But it has been pointed out to me that this scene isn't really up to standards. I get that, it wasn't supposed to mean anything. It was just mainly a joke, and the Doctor didn't really have any feelings, there wasn't trying to turn her straight or anything. He just kissed her because he was just this energetic embrace of emotions for being free from being in this torment at the moment. And Jenny promptly slaps him across the face. But the fact that the 11th Doctor gets slapped a lot in Series 6 and Series 7, and sometimes it's for very little prompt for something that deserves a slap across the face. Like, there's a lot of scenes, like, it's mainly set up for humour, and male abuse like that is usually set for humour, so, it's just not, this is not like, it doesn't hold up to the standards. I will admit though, I did laugh when I first watched this. Mind you, when I watched this for the first time, I was like, 14, 15? No, it must have been later than that. No, it must be much later than that. What am I on about? 18, 19? I don't remember. But anyway, so that scene, just forget about it for a moment. And the Doctor basically explains that he needs to find Clara, and Jenny, Strax, and Vastra are just like, what are you on about? Clara's dead, isn't she? To which the Doctor's like, I'll explain. I'll make it quick. And we get into this beautiful flashback. Essentially, it's made to look like an early film It's in sepia tone. You've got like film grain and film marks on the screen, and the audio is made to sound like it's from one of those old sound systems. You know, and it's like a big flower thing. I can't remember what they're called, but it's just so great attention to detail, and Saul McEdam really gives this flashback some really cool editing moments as we get a lot of like clips, montage of it, and then we get a few like flash frames, photos, which gives the feeling of a detective story, gives the feeling that you're building up into this mystery. And he's basically essentially learned that the doctor took Clara. He originally planned to take her to London, 1893, but instead took her to Yorkshire, 1893, and basically they discover that there's this dead body, and the journalist, the person that we meet really early on in the story, he basically befriends the doctor. The doctor and Clara are the only ones who would listen about all these murders that are connected to Gillyflower and Mr. Sweet in Sweetville. And so the doctor and Clara basically sign themselves up to be part of this system, only for when they realise what's happening, that basically certain people get, who are considered the perfect specimens, get frozen in a sense, waiting for this, for a massive catastrophe that Gillyflower basically plans on making. And the doctor and Clara basically be set into this system where they set into this pool of ancient acid. And if you are fine, if you are perfectly safe from this acid, then you get frozen and be put into these strange jars, which is so Victorian. Or as the doctor, who was rejected mainly because he was not human, usually the specimens die, but he actually survived the process, and so his body was basically solided up in this red kind of form. So his arms are like constantly stretched out, as we've seen earlier on in the episode. And Ada basically realizes that one of them is alive. The doctor can't talk because his jaw is locked in place. And Ada basically keeps this so-called monster of hers in the thing, and she basically explains just like, you were like me, you were rejected, but you also survived. Maybe, like me, you can be forgiven by Mother, and we can then, and you can like live with me, and I can look after you. And I love how she's just so kind-hearted. She's just so, what she did was horrible, keep the doctor against his will, but she had no ill intent. She's basically a child that's trapped in an adult's body in a sense, and she has this idea, and also the way that she's been treated. You feel really bad and sympathetic for her. And we also get, and basically when she finds out the monster is escaped, all she could do is just cry and just be in this really depressive mode. And Gillyflower basically pronounces to Ada that, like, you were never going to be perfect. You were never going to be part of Sweetwill in this new society, in this new world. To which Gillyflower just, that Ada just, it just really gets her down. And so the doctor finds Clara in one of these little houses, smashes it, they set her free, and basically the doctor has to basically try to explain to Bastard and Jenny what's going on, but the doctor doesn't actually explain anything. He kind of keeps the mystery to himself, and Clara never actually learns that these people actually know a Clara. So from the Patronotra gang's point of view, this could actually be the same Clara. And from Clara's point of view, these people are still this is like the only first encounter, this strange meeting between them. And so what happens then is that they're basically like, right, we gotta stop Gillyflower because she's nuts and she's crazy. And then they basically hear this crying, this sad sound. And there's a great moment where Gillyflower, Ada's just like, who is that? And the doctor puts his her hand on his face, and she's like, "My monster, you came back." And it's just like, "Yes, and you were kind, you look after me, I survived the process, and it's thanks to you, thank you very much. Now we need your help to take down your mother." To which Ada's just like, "I can't, even in this moment, even after she's basically told me that I am useless and worthless to her, I still cannot betray her." So the doctor's like, "Okay, come with me, I need to show you something." To which then the doctor and Clara interact with Gillyflower in her office, and we have this big confrontation between them, and we have some really iconic moments, some really iconic lines. Some of my favourites is the reveal of Mr. Sweet, which turns out to be this little parasite thing from the Silurian age, which seems to give out this venom, this poison, which kills people and turns them into this red thing. And essentially, Gillyflower has been feeding it salt. We've seen throughout the episode she's been basically pouring salt onto her bosom, basically revealed that she's feeding Mr. Sweet. And I don't know if it's supposed to be like just an animal creature she's just befriended, or whether it is an actual, something that she can actually talk to, or has some sort of psychic connection. But the fact that we don't know, and it could all just be Gillyflower just going completely insane, is something which I actually highly appreciate, because one of the great bits about this scene is essentially we get to learn how crazy, how nuts Gillyflower is. I love that the doctor's basically like, he has no mood for this. He's like, "I'm the doctor and you're nuts." There's also a really great moment where he's trying to confront her about this, and it's probably one of the most iconic lines where the doctor's just like, "Do you know how much how bad this venom is? In the wrong hands, it can do catastrophe." To which Gillyflower's just like, "You see these? You know what they are? They're the wrong hands." And she's just giddy to herself. She just does not care. And some might criticize her as a cliched, mustache twirling villain. And to that I say, yes, she is. But she's also so fun at it. With Mark Gatiss' script and Diana Griggs' acting in this, gives the impression that it's this really classic tribute to like the Hammer horror films, where you do have these kind of really fun mustache twirling villains, characters who are so completely insane that the fact that they might even know they're insane, but the fact they just have so much fun with it, and their plan for them anyway makes sense. Gillyflower wants to make this perfect world, this perfect society, and essentially the doctor basically reveals to us and Ada, who's in the other room, that Ada's eyes, her blindness, didn't actually come from her abusive father. It actually came from her mother, who's trying to give her a little bit of this toxin to trying to find out the antidote, to try and form out an antitoxin, so that her and her soldiers, her pilgrims, can survive the coming apocalypse. And we essentially start slowly learning through little bits of dialogue, like Jenny heard Gillyflower state at the very start of the episode, something to do, the rain will come down, Armageddon will rain down upon those who are not worthy. And we kind of clicked that Gillyflower has this massive missile which will release this antitoxin that will spread throughout Yorkshire, killing anybody who isn't either A, immune, or B, in Gillyflower's care. And so we have this action scene. But let's talk about one of the most strangest elements, one of the scenes that actually gets surprisingly talked about a lot in the Crimson Horror, and that is the scene where Strax, basically his horse has failed him to get him to the Sweetville. So he basically plans on killing it in a really funny bit of exchange monologue from Dan Starkey, until he basically befriends this small kid who basically has this strange way of talking. It's like, take two lefts, then a right, and then you have reached your destination. And this kid is basically revealed his name is Thomas. Thomas. For those of you who don't understand, it's a joke about tom-toms, a device which is basically used as a map in cars. It's basically it's navigation system which you can cars can thing like in real life, and so that's kind of like the joke is that this is like that kid is like the precursor to the real life TomTom devices, and so a lot of people really hate this. I know I got a chuckle out of it. It's not like the most funniest thing ever. I will admit it is pretty dumb, but it's not worth anyone's anger at all. It's just a stupid scene, and Drax uses it as like to help him with navigating Yorkshire. So the ending of it, I love the scene where Ada basically is just like she basically just releases all her anger, all that built up, all that neglect that she's got, and I love the scene where she's just you hag, and she just beats up her mother with a stick, and the doctor and Clara have to separate them. It's like no, and Gillyflower's like, oh, I've changed my ways, I'm so sorry. Oh, Ada, you're always so, and she puts a gun to her, useful, as the doctor basically destroys this system which he believes is Gillyflower's way of releasing this rocket. However, as she basically explains, there's a second system inside the chimney itself. And so the doctor, basically everybody basically gets there to try and save Ada's life from Gillyflower. And this is actually something that seems really classic. You know, you've got the stairway, you've got all these characters trying to reason, trying to beg with one of these villain characters to let someone go. It feels like something that came right out of 1931. Films like Dracula and Frankenstein. It has that iconic classic horror film aesthetic, which I think is why Mark Gatiss really shines in the story. This feels like a passion project by Mark Gatiss. Sure, it means that because of the way the scene is set up, Vastra, Jenny and Strex, who are basically the main protagonists in the first half of the story before the Doctor and Clara gets in, don't really have much to do. Clara, throughout the story, doesn't really have much to do as well, apart from the Doctor saving her at one point. She does mention part of the mystery is like, what's a chimney if there's no smoke, if there's no factory, and it's basically there that they learn about the rocket. But in terms of character, in terms of personality, Clara is a blank state here. There's not really here worth talking about, and it's really Doctor and her, the Doctor and his trying to reason with Gillyflower and trying to comfort Ada at this time. It really is like the key of the emotional grip of the story as Gillyflower releases the rocket up into the sky. However, it's basically revealed off screen that Jenny and Vastra really took out the toxin before the missile was launched. Basically, Gillyflower's plans failed, and I can't remember what happens. She fires. I can't remember if Ada was the one who pushes her. Oh no, sorry. I know I remember what happens. Strax shoots a missile, destroying the piece of the staircase, and Gillyflower falls to her death. And Mr. Sweet basically crawls out, knowing that Miss Gillyflower is dying. And we have this great moment. One of my favourite moments in this story is the ending where the Doctor's just like, right, I'm going to take this thing, maybe take it back to the prehistoric age and just live out its life as a normal creature of its same species. And Ada's like feeling around on the ground for Mr. Sweet, finds him and just smacks it with her walking cane, just absolutely brutally devours it. She just has this built up anger in the story. And we have then basically the wrapping up of the story where we have Ada basically it's like, I must step out of the shadows and go into the light, and the Doctor's just like, you will do well. I guarantee it. You can now live your life the way you intended it. And you just see this. I really wish Ada was a companion. I really wish this charm to Matt Smith and Rachel Sterling's performances, and the character of the Doctor and Ada, and this whole and this whole like monster subplot. It's really well handled, and the Doctor basically keeps up the mystery of who Clara is to vast Regeni and Strax, and so the Doctor disappears. We also get there's a character, it's the police officer, and every time something strange, something odd happens, he faints, which is actually a reference to how in older films it's usually women who faint because they can't handle things. Apparently, that's an old-fashioned stereotype. Women faint at like any like sign of any sort of strange, abnormal view. So it's kind of a spin on that. So it's kind of fun in a sense, but it's the fact that it's done exactly the same way constantly does get tiring throughout the episode. And so that's the Crimson Horror. And overall, I might be one of the few people. I'm in the small group of people who really enjoy this episode. It's a classic example of Mark Gatiss just showing up his love and his appreciation for horror and those like old film aesthetics. I think I've stated this before in my Unquiet Dead vlog, but he did this brilliant documentary on BBC Three, a 3-part series where he talks about old horror films like the Universal and Hammer horror films, and his passion is just on the wall here. And luckily Saul Metzstein, who has directed some great stories, he's directed very great looking stories. However, the scripts usually aren't up to par to his directing, or at least with his criminal stories, at least they were fun and engaging. But here Saul Metzstein really gets something he can correct his teeth in, and so this combination really does work, and I really wish to see these people work on something again someday. Something hopefully again in time with this whole love of horror. But the story isn't mainly a horror film. It's mainly a patronotrogam story, and it does a fantastic job in reintroducing these characters, setting up all these mysteries, and basically is a tribute to Sherlock Holmes as well. This story feels like a great tribute to all of these old-fashioned things that Mark Gatiss grew up with as a child. And so I personally really enjoy Crimson Horror, and hope that you give it another try, and hopefully that you may enjoy it. You might not. Like I said, it's not a particularly loved story in the Doctor Who community, but maybe it's for you. Maybe it's not for you. Only you can judge. But personally for me, I absolutely loved it. So that's the Crimson Horror. So join me next time. Wait a minute, I just remembered there's a wrap-up scene where Clara, she goes back to modern times and she sees the 2 kids that she looks after. They basically discover her mystery, that she's a time traveller with the Doctor, and they find all of these photos, and they basically bribe Clara to go into time traveling, which leads into the next story. Also, I forgot to mention, I have actually printed out a DVD cover of this. There's no actual one inside, mainly because the CD that came with this, basically you had 2 boxes for the series 7 part B. One of them contained 1 disc, and then one of them contained both of them contained 2 discs. And so I can't remember, but anyway, because of that, this disc, which contains the last 3 stories of series 7, didn't actually have its own case in. So this is what it looks like on my shelf, with the spine there. And on the back, this is from Christopher DVD Covers, if I remember my facts correctly. Also includes the next episode, and also the finale. And also a short, and also a companion documentary. Sorry about that. So yeah, that's what it looks like on my shelf. So anyway, now that's out of the way, join me next time, where the Doctor will be taking these 2 kids on their first adventure through space and time. In the future, he takes them to a fun fair, but the fun has been upgraded. So join me next time for The Nightmare in Silver, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon, and we get introduced to the new redesign of the Cybermen. I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da!